We're good? Okay. Well, so welcome to this training on using career and technical education data to identify equity gaps in Oregon. During it, we'll be returning to the data inquiries like we introduced in an earlier call, to other trainings to support the creation of an operational plan that you can use to coordinate your work around closing equity gaps in career and technical education. I'm Steve Klein from REL Northwest at Education Northwest, where I direct our career education and workforce development projects. I'm joined today by several of my colleagues from REL Northwest, including Amy Arneson, Ella Belhaj-Moore, and Michelle O'Dara. And we're indebted to Jenny Farrell, who's coordinating our technology. We also have staff from the Oregon Department of Education who'll be joining and presenting and the discussions. And I'll specifically be calling out Melinda Schell, who's an education specialist at Oregon Department of Ed. I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves as we move through the presentation. As questions arise, please ask them in the chat. We're going to monitor and respond as we go along. We'll also stop periodically to see if there are any questions that you have. As a quick reminder, I sent out an email on Thursday with links to the CTE Participation Explorer and prior trainings, as well as about an hour ago, an activity attachment that we'll use, refer to later in this webinar. So next slide, please. So this is the last of our 3 trainings exploring how to use data to identify equity gaps in career and technical education and applying research-based strategies for closing them. After we review the objectives for this training, I'm going to ask the Oregon Department of Ed to provide some context to clarify how today's training can inform the update of your Oregon Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment, or referred to as a CLNA, affectionately. And that's, of course, required under the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act, the federal legislation, AKA Perkins V. Then we're going to do a quick overview of the first 2 trainings to reacquaint you with the CTE Participation Explorer web tool, which we introduced in training 1. And you can use this tool to explore performance outcomes across the state, region, or your own district to identify equity gaps that need to be addressed. And that's going to be really important as you tackle your comprehensive local needs assessment. We're also going to review a data inquiry framework that we introduced in training 1 and a root cause framework that we introduced in training 2. And that's designed to help you isolate the underlying factors that can affect your performance outcomes. We're going to have a discussion session then to answer any questions that you may have about the online tool or root cause analysis. Then we're going to move on to developing an operational plan. We're going to showcase a 1-page plan template that you can use to coordinate your response to gaps you've identified. It's a really simple and effective way of communicating what you seek to accomplish, how you'll go about doing it, who'll drive the work, and how you'll assess your results. We'll have a breakout where we're going to use some of the materials that we've touched on earlier from trainings 1 and 2 to begin thinking about how to populate an operational plan. Want to be really clear, the goal of this session is not to complete an operational plan. We understand that that's going to be something that in the longer run you will do. What we really want to do is emphasize this systematic process that we're using to be able to approach your comprehensive local needs assessment in a strategic way. So again, this is really about process, understanding how we go about using data and research and systematic thought to undertake a plan of action. Next slide, please. Very quickly, never been an issue before. Take a moment to read some of the meeting agreements that have guided our work. I'm really going to emphasize the 3rd bullet, which is ask questions. We really want this to be engaging. We want you to get something out of this when we understand that you need to also provide questions. And I know that sometimes we're all a little hesitant to ask, but please do. Next slide, please. And just sort of a quick reminder that REL Northwest is one of 10 regional education laboratories across the US that serve their respective geographic regions. And the goal of the overarching REL program is to help states and districts use data to address important policy issues and improve educational practices. We provide these services to local stakeholders through research alliances like the Oregon Graduation and Postsecondary Success Alliance. The U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences selects organizations to operate each REL, And Education Northwest is covering the Northwest region, which you can see covers the Alaska, Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Idaho. Next slide, please. So third, training focused on planning. But again, just to reiterate, this is a sequential process where we start by identifying gaps and prioritizing where to work, and we do that using data. Then we conduct a root cause analysis to investigate why. Today, we're gonna recapitulate a little bit, just because we understand that not everybody was possibly at earlier trainings, or it's been a long time. So, but what we're planning to do today is to, using the information that we'll share with you, introduce the concept of an operational plan and showcase a one-page template you can adopt. And again, the whole point of this is to inform your work around the CLNA, which we all need to update and submit to the Oregon Department of Ed in early 2023. And we'll also train you on monitoring progress by attaching some metrics to the components of your plan as part of our operational planning. What I'd like to do at this point is invite my colleague, Melinda Schell from ODE to provide some context about the work. So next slide, please. And Melinda, it's all yours.
All right, thanks, Steve. So we've shared this information in earlier trainings, but it bears repeating here. Oregon is committed to identifying disparities in educational outcomes for the purpose of targeting areas for action, intervention, and investment. So I refer you to training 1 for more information on the purposes and the use of this equity lens, if you'd like more information on that. Our focus on CTE is well placed. In a study that REL Northwest conducted in collaboration with ODE and the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, we found gaps in participation, concentration, and program retention rates across a range of student demographic areas, including gender, race and ethnicity, special population status, English learner status, and socioeconomic status. I will go ahead and place the links to that study and the related infographics in the chat in case you'd like to look at that a little bit further. And before we proceed into the next slide, does anybody have any questions related to the equity lens or the REL Northwest study? And I can't really see chat, so I'd have to have a little bit of help there if there is a question.
Nothing in the chat yet, Melinda.
Thank you, Donna. All right, well, then we'll move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so again, as Steve mentioned, we are intentionally connecting this training to the comprehensive local needs assessment that your consortia or district will begin working on in this next year. And we want to underscore the importance of stakeholder engagement in conducting that CLNA and engaging with your local and regional advisory committees as well as stakeholders. And this training will demonstrate how to use the dashboard to answer the questions in the needs assessment, set a goal, and then create an action plan. Next slide, please. So the comprehensive local needs assessment requires that all Perkins grantees follow a process to identify priorities and needs in partnership with a range of stakeholders. This training will provide templates and a process that you can use to integrate the data you've reviewed and the strategies you've identified into an action plan that you can also use to track progress. You'll be able to use what you've learned during the REL sessions across all parts of the needs assessment, and you will have access to these materials as you begin conducting your assessment, along with the tools that will be developed in the new needs assessment guide. And as a refresher, these are the 6 components of the CLNA that you will need to complete. Next slide, please. So in this training, we're going to, again, like Steve said, do a quick review of the structure of the CTE Participation Explorer dashboard that REL Northwest developed for Oregon and that you explored in depth in the previous 2 trainings if you were able to attend, and hopefully I'll give you a quick overview if you weren't. And then when working through the training activities, think about how you will use the dashboard and the data it contains with your stakeholders. It is critical to get stakeholder feedback as you conduct your comprehensive local needs assessment And to this end, the state has outlined 5 principles for engagement, which includes engaging a wide range of individuals for inclusivity, making it easy for them to participate so that the meetings are accessible, planning for ongoing engagement, providing clear information so members are well informed, and providing for focused involvement, building towards long-term partnerships. As a part of this effort, consider who should be engaged among your stakeholders, i.e. required versus advisory members, how the data in the Explorer dashboard should be shared, and how member feedback will be incorporated. Now I'd like to turn it over to Amy Arneson, who will take us through the CTE Participation Explorer dashboard.
Great. Thank you. So we'll spend a few minutes now just briefly reviewing the dashboard, a few reminders of how you can use the tool and the data inquiry framework that we shared in training 1. Then we'll review the root cause analysis process that you initiated in your training 2, which considers factors and evidence-based strategies you might use to address your identified CTE equity gaps. But before diving into that review, we wanted to invite any returning participants or others who may have had a chance to engage with the previous training materials, just to share any thoughts or learnings that you have from the past 2 trainings. So we just kind of want to open it up, and you're welcome to use the chat. Just what have you learned so far, either from your own state or consortia or district data, or about the process so far? Or what gap did you identify kind of in your regional data to address? So if anyone has any learnings or thoughts, I'll give you just a minute to type those into the chat. All right, so I'm not seeing anything come through yet, so maybe it's because there's a lot and you're still typing, or if we have new participants too to this 3rd training, that's just fine as well. We'll be sharing links to everything so that you can go back and explore your data and things like that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So and then we'll also drop the link to the dashboard in the chat now as well. But as a reminder, so the Explorer dashboard, it's an online tool that you can use to identify student participation and retention in CTE programming. So both students who are entering CTE programs, at least starting them, and then when we talk about retention, we mean progressing through a CTE program of study. So the tool is designed to provide you with access to these types of data that are classified into 3 areas. So that first tab that we call the Annual Participation tab, it provides snapshots of CTE program participation categories at a point in time that you select. So you'll choose a year, and then you'll see some rates of participation for that year. It combines grades 9 through 12, so we're looking at secondary programs. And you can also look at it for selected student groups. The second tab, the Cohort Participation tab, is very similar, but here we're looking at a graduating cohort of students. So in this one, the data do reflect kind of their cumulative results over an entire cohort. So that means that they do reflect all of their secondary, all of their high school course taking experiences, and looking at students moving through programs of study that way. Then the final tab, which is really key to the equity exploration that we had to do kind of in that data inquiry process. It's a lot of the same information. It plots actually some of the exact same numbers that the Cohort Participation tab does, but organized in data displays that are designed to help you kind of easily spot where there could be gaps to address. All right, and so the link is in the chat box for you if you'd like to kind of familiarize or refamiliarize yourself with it. Since we kind of had the opportunity to do that in the previous 2 trainings, we're not going to spend time exploring the data right now, though we encourage you to use the dashboard and share it with your colleagues as well. All right, next slide. So in training one, we explored the use of a data inquiry framework, which is that cycle on the screen on the left side there. It's a 5-step cyclical process that can help us to think about how we can use data systematically to develop and answer questions related to the problems of practice that we identify. So in the context of this training, these problems relate to the equity gaps we identified previously using the Explorer dashboard. As parts of trainings 1 and 2, we learned how to use the dashboard to analyze data and identify those equity gaps. We subsequently used this information to formulate a root cause analysis to identify the factors directly responsible for the problems we observed. We closed last time with a review of some possible evidence-based interventions that could be used to help shrink those equity gaps. And so today we will explore the last 2 components of this framework, so the ones in blue on the furthest left side there. Developing an action plan to guide our work and identifying approaches for monitoring progress and measuring success. All right, next slide. So as a reminder, root cause analysis is a strategy that's used to identify and analyze the component factors that contribute to an educational problem or observed outcome. So because education systems are complex, we all recognize that, there is rarely a single root cause to a given problem. Usually several causes in combination bring about an outcome. However, by addressing one of the primary root causes, educators can often make improvements in an outcome. So once the root is resolved, the symptom may disappear. For example, a school district with low numbers of students participating in work-based learning may seek to recruit new employers. And while this could potentially increase the number of students participating, it may not address the root cause if the issue actually relates to student scheduling constraints. So during training 2, we focused on identifying factors which we had control over and sought to distinguish between root causes and contributing factors. During breakouts, we explored how we might differentiate root causes from contributing factors based on an equity gap that we identified. So in practice, once you have specified a root cause, you should seek to verify it using data. All right, next slide. So in the second training, we also introduced the use of a fishbone diagram as a tool for conducting a root cause analysis. In this example, we begin by specifying a problem statement, which is entered at the head, so that's on the right side of the screen. Then we identify possible factors that might contribute to this problem, and where possible, we group them into overarching themes, shown here as issue boxes with the individual causes depicted on each rib of the fish. So in this instance, the problem statement is that high school graduates who ever had an individualized education plan, or an IEP, in grades 9 through 12, they're less likely than non-IEP students to achieve CTE concentrator status in health science programming. So we identified 4 themes: school, students, workplace, and teachers. And the fishbone analysis requires brainstorming causes that may help you to address your problem statement. In the process, you may identify a multitude of causes. For example, focusing on students, we identified 3 possible causes. Students that have had an IEP may lack science prerequisites, may not believe that they can succeed, or they may feel isolated in classes. And so once you have completed your brainstorming process, you can prioritize causes and begin investigating. You'll use this information to help you select an intervention strategy to address the challenge you identified. And then the next slide shows the sort of completed fishbone diagram here. So when you've completed it, you will probably have identified a range of possible causes. And the next step is to identify which of them may be root causes and which may be contributing causes, which is the breakout activity we ended with in training 2. Next slide. We also shared examples of evidence-based strategies identified in the literature that one might adopt to address an identified root cause. In this example, relating to students who ever had an IEP, we might conduct our own search of the internet, for example, visiting the What Works Clearinghouse or the CTE Research Network, to find activities or interventions which are backed by research that can help, that can be used to help solve the problems we identified. So in this case, we found an article in the Journal for Vocational Special Needs Students that examined strategies for managing the placement and service of students with disabilities in the CTE classroom. Next slide. So digging into the article, we found that with respect to teacher preparation programs, researchers have found that only 35% of colleges responding to a survey had their special education and regular education programs housed within the same academic department. And that just over 2/3 of them covered issues of special needs and student placement in CTE and in their coursework. Two suggested strategies offered include engaging CTE teachers with IEP teams to assist in planning and placement so that educators can explain the course expectations and prepare the IEP writing team for plan development. And this can result in the enrollment of more cognitively and effectively prepared students focused on success. Another identified strategy is to give CTE teachers access to students' IEP plans and engage them in finding accommodations so that appropriate instructional changes can be made. CTE educators need background information on the students' disabilities in order to provide the appropriate accommodations and curricular modifications. All righty, so the next slide, I'll pass it back to Steve. And we do have a few responses in the chat that you can review now in terms of learnings from past trainings from those in the room.
Yeah, so we wanted to have a little break time here to discuss with you some of questions you may have about the materials or activities which you and your team either engaged in an earlier training or this is your first time attending. Offer you an opportunity to raise any questions you have about the CTE Participation Explorer and or the root cause analysis. Next slide, please. Part of the reason we sent out the links ahead of time was we wanted to give you an opportunity to re-engage with that material and see if refresh your memory prior to sort of digging into the third step of the with the operational planning. So we had a couple questions, and basically what questions do you have about the CTE Data Explorer and its use, and what questions do you have about root cause analysis and its application? And we're gonna turn off the screen, and so we can actually look at one another. And really, this is an opportunity. Meeting rule number 3, right, was active engagement. So does anyone have any thoughts? And remember, this is all, it's all good. No question or comment is out of bounds here. Any thoughts about anything that you've seen thus far, or if you've engaged on your own? Did you have questions about, maybe we can start off with the online tool, the Participation Explorer? So is there anyone who had an earlier experience using the Explorer? And if so, did you see any gaps of concern or confirmations of what you might have expected to see at your site?
I'll share one thing that I'm aware of. We haven't been using it locally, but we were at the statewide advisory committee meeting a few weeks ago, and Janelle had a slide that showed some information about gaps and just like screen caps of some of those, how you see the gaps, especially around special ed, I think was the slide, Janelle. But the people that were participating in the meeting could easily understand that visual. And I think that's the value in it, is when you go out to your community members, I think they're easily going to grasp the concept. It's not going to take a lot of like super math nerds or, you know, some of those stereotypical kinds of people to be able to interpret what they're seeing, because the display is very simple, I think, to make sense of.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat, who should be involved in the root cause analysis? I've had folks wonder who should be included on that team. Well, that's part of, I guess there's 2 ways to answer that. One is, as part of your comprehensive local needs assessment, there's a fairly robust team that is expected to be participating at the district level as you explore how you would like to approach your planning for the 2 years. But there's also a recognition that we shouldn't just be driven by Perkins. and that there's no time like now to improve. And in that case, who should be included in the root cause analysis? As we get into the operational planning, you'll see that the work has to be done by someone. You can't do it all yourself. And so ensuring that you get the right people to the table so that you have buy-in to be able to do that work is really important. I'll ask if there's anyone on ODE who would like to push forward more on that.
Well, I just want to say, we've been exploring how do we use more student voice too, and like there's no better root cause analysis than asking like, what were some barriers that you experienced? So I think talking and listening are really important pieces of it. So looking at data might help point you to the direction, but it's never going to give you the answer. It's just going to point you like, oh, we need to look deeper, and looking deeper means talking, listening, especially listening, double listening, asking questions. And so I think it doesn't have to be a one-time process. This information can provide you tips on what to be asking as you move forward in many different places and contexts with many different people.
So there was a question that's been answered in the chat about, will the data be updated? And the answer is yes, the data will be updated. There's a project to update the dashboard with more years of data. And there'll also be, you can see there in the chat, there's annual training starting early next year to walk through the dashboard. So that's going to be a very useful tool. Rob, you had pointed out that that you had had a chance to play with the Explorer a little bit. 40 days on the job makes you practically an expert. Is there anything you'd like to say, just in terms of, not to put you on the spot, but to do so, in terms of when you used the tool itself? Like, did you find it pretty intuitive? You can unmute if you want, or not. Okay. Kalani, you had said a lot of confirmation. Do you feel comfortable saying anything about that? So,
sure, absolutely. A lot of the data that we get, it kind of comes at the end of things. So we know that after we've got some gaps in completion of programs, et cetera, among students that have graduated, it's kind of nice to be able to see along the way as participants and then as concentrators how those gaps develop over time. So we didn't see anything that was surprising to us, but it was good to get that confirmation that it's not just happening at the end, that it's happening at the beginning too. So we could better kind of target the things that we're doing. Yeah. I'm not being very articulate today.
No, that was good.
I can share an interesting thing that I noticed at the state level. So we've been working a lot to expand our programs to be more inclusive of students with disabilities. And one of the things I hear a lot from districts is like, we're really worried about safety, or that there's these concerns around safety and equipment and other things. And it was super interesting to look at where the largest gaps were. And one of our larger gaps statewide was in business management administration. And my hunch then is it's not around safety issues in those programs, but it's more about prerequisites, how they schedule the programs, and maybe re-looking at how we think about those business and management programs in our state to be more inclusive. So I did point out some like common assumptions that are made, and then the reality of what's showing up in our data, which I thought was really helpful for us to have at the tip of our fingers to see.
Yeah. I just also want to point out in the chat, Donna, thank you for pointing out that the new needs assessment guide has suggestions on who to include. And so it is really critically important as you're digging into your data to get people to the table. And the other nice thing about it is that you have different viewpoints. And that's really important, particularly when you're having conversations about equity, making sure that you have the voices at the table to ensure that people are being heard. The other piece here, it sounds like the needs, the Explorer has some use, some utility. It sounds like the root cause, though, was a little challenging for some people. And does anyone want to say more about the sort of just thinking, or maybe you've done the root cause or have some more facility with it? But is there anyone who feels willing to say a few words about root cause analysis itself? Number three, people. Number three. Bullet three.
So this is Karen. I just want to say that even though the root cause analysis can be very difficult and very time consuming, that it's absolutely worth it, simply because otherwise what you're doing is putting a Band-Aid on something and you're not addressing the real problem. So unless you can actually identify what the root is in order to address the situation or address the problem, it's going to keep coming up.
Right. So why don't we, I will say that the root cause analysis is critically important. It's the second step in this process. And the reason it's so important is we start, you're going to hear me repeat this a lot. We start with data. We look at our data and we see what the data are telling us about our programs. Once we've identified gaps that we think we need to address, I mean, that's the whole idea of the comprehensive local needs assessment. We want to prioritize those gaps, and then we want to dig into them. And the root cause analysis is a way of a structured approach to looking at a gap, a performance gap, or a participation gap in this case, and seeing and asking yourself questions about why is it happening. And so it's really critically important that we build facility around using a root cause analysis, because otherwise, if we're not structured about thinking about the data and the gaps, then when we try to address them, we may not be doing it in a systematic way. Elizabeth, you have your hand up? Go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say about the root cause analysis, I love it, right? It gives us some great information, and the only downside ever, which is actually also an upside, is that sometimes you come up with a root cause that you're like, oh, geez, what am I going to do with that? And the one that's coming up for me is with the lack of female students in our construction program of study and our metals and manufacturing. When we do the root cause, there's some pretty clear reasons, and then it's kind of like, okay, how do I fix that, and what am I and am I not allowed to do? So that's the other side of the root cause. I love it and hate it sometimes.
So you're bringing up, in some ways, I couldn't have asked for a better transition, but you're bringing up a great point, which is we do the root cause analysis and we identify challenges, we identify causes, and they're probably multifaceted. There's not like one specific thing. And as we know with the root cause, some of them may be related to the student. Some of it may be related to the institution, the school, the way it's set up. Just as an example, I'm working with a district up in Washington State, and they were talking, again, with students with disabilities and CTE. And one of their epiphanies was that they had a greenhouse, and the greenhouse paths were graveled. And that made it very difficult for students in wheelchairs or with other disabilities, mobility issues, to be able to address, to participate. Some of them may be societal, and particularly when we get into some of the issues relating to, in the case of females participating potentially in the trades. And so, Elizabeth, your hand's down now. And so, you know, I think that we have to recognize that a root cause, if you're doing a good root cause analysis, It will help you identify different thematic areas where there may be challenges. And then within those, you might come up with many different areas that are causing challenges. And so I want to let's move on because what we're going to be sharing next, if you could put the slides back up, is basically the idea of creating an operational plan to manage implementation efforts. So an operational plan is actually, Jenny, can you throw the slides back up? There you go. Next slide. So it's creating an operational plan is once you've defined a problem that you wish to solve, and ideally, you're going to want to have evidence-based strategies to address it. Then you begin formulating a plan of action. So in this next section, we're going to introduce you to a one-page strategic plan template that you can adopt for your own use. Next slide, please. So as a quick reminder, step 4 in the data inquiry cycle is to develop an action plan to manage your implementation. Sustaining your team's effort is a challenge, often in the face of numerous pressures that will draw on their time. So using an action plan to coordinate your team's improvement efforts can be both efficient and help you be more effective. And you'll see in the plan that we're going to share, it can also help you track your progress that you're making on the activities that you've been implementing. And so it's really, the idea behind this is to establish a strategy to do some work, track it, and then have benchmarks to assess the results. And in Oregon, this plan can serve as a way of operationalizing change. And we believe that as you do your comprehensive local needs assessment, this can be a very useful tool. So next slide, please. So the plan itself, here's organizations often develop really comprehensive strategic plans to undertake change. At an organization I was with prior to joining Education Northwest, they had a 40-page strategic plan that guess where it sat on, which shelf, because it was incomprehensible to people. So what we're trying to do is show you a simple one-page operational planning template that you can use to quickly communicate the work you intend to accomplish and how you go about it. And it's really important that people be able to see and understand this and be able to pick it up and make sense of it. This plan is designed to help you operationalize and track multiple strategies, some of which may have multiple activities. So the plan that we're going to share has 4 parts to it. And before you go, don't advance yet. The top there, you see the goal. So we'll talk a little bit about a goal statement. Then you have on the far left, benchmarks. That's how you measure what it is you're going to accomplish. Now, I'm going to actually address that last, but it's in some ways the first thing that's going to draw people's eyes. They want to see what is it that they're accomplishing. But to get benchmarks, you have to have a strategy. So we have strategies for success, and we'll explain what those are, and then the activities that tie to that. And so ideally, what you've done in the one-page operational plan is you've created a very clear goal statement. You recognize that it can be a complex effort to try to address it. So you may have multiple strategies with activities tapped, right, aligned to those. And all of those are aligned to a benchmark to measure what you're doing. I will also just end with saying that this is something that we actually use at Education Northwest. My team that I've had, we actually created a one-page operational plan, and we use that to drive our own program improvement efforts. So I'm not putting something out in front of you that we haven't actually been using ourselves. Next slide, please. So the first part of the template is the goal statement, and that's supposed to clearly lay out a problem you seek to accomplish. So should be measurable, so you know you have accomplished it. It's got to be written in a way that will resonate with potential stakeholders, and it should be achievable in the time frame of your intervention. So you want to be as tangible and concrete as possible in drafting your goal statement so that all members of your team and the stakeholders in your community understand what is going to be the outcome, what's going to be achieved. And that also includes clearly stating who will be impacted and what the results will be. So for example, if the problem is that Oregon high school graduates who have ever been had an IEP in grades 9 to 12 are less likely than non-IEP students to achieve CTE concentrator status, in health sciences in particular, then your goal might be increase the number of students with an IEP who participate and persist in health science programming to achieve concentrator status, right? So it laid out a future state, it addresses identified problem, states what the results will be, and who's going to be affected by it. And it's going to be measurable because we talk about the number of students. So ideally, you write it in a simple and clear way that will resonate with potential stakeholders. Next slide. So once you've got your goal statement written, then we move into strategies. So that's the idea of translating the results of your root cause analysis into some sort of a strategy for success. So because you'll potentially identify a range of possible causes, you may want to prioritize a list and then focus your efforts on a relatively important issue. So for example, if one of the most pressing issues you identified in your root cause analysis was that CTE instructors do not understand how to tailor coursework to accommodate the needs of students in an IEP, you might investigate the literature, right? We're not just making this up. You want to go and try to find activities or strategies that have been tested and have been proven to work. And in this instance, a review of the literature revealed that instructors need to actively collaborate with IEP teams to design and deliver activities that are aligned with the planned content. So address the situation, you develop a strategy for success that focuses on engaging CTE instructors. It's really a short little punchy, you see how it's bolded there? It's very short, punchy, and people can read it and understand what it is they're doing. Then we want to make sure that it's mapped to an identified theme, in this case, instructors, and it's clear and succinct. And you might want to have a little tagline there that provides a little more background around it. So here, support CTE instructors in tailoring coursework to ensure students succeed. Next slide. Want to just go back to this idea that we're not making it up. You want to find evidence-based strategies that you're using and to address your challenges. We, in the training 2, provided as part of the template, the PowerPoint, a list of some potential evidence-based strategies that you could use. However, on this slide, and you'll be able to download these slides, we also put some links to some other organizations, such as the CTE Research Network, the Department of Education's Perkins Collaborative Resource Network, the What Works Clearinghouse, where you can go online and look for potential strategies that you can use to address an identified root cause. Next slide. Well, so you got a goal statement, you have a strategy that you're going to attack it with, you've ransacked the literature, or you've looked around to find some ideas that'll work. Now you move to the activities. And here, you're going to put the specific steps you're going to take to address the root cause you identified. So for example, when reading about the challenges that students on an IEP experience in taking CTE coursework, you might have uncovered some promising practices or evidence-based strategies to improve their experience, such as we said, engaging CTE instructors in the IEP design process. So here, you use your operational plan to document how you'll approach engaging CTE instructors and an associated set of activities you believe you should pursue. And keep in mind that you may have to have multiple strategies for success. So earlier when we were talking about, like, you had the root cause and you said that it's challenging, you come up with something. Well, it may be that you're going to have to take a couple of activities to address what you identified. And then there, you put in there, you align now the activity with a strategy. You may not have, in this instance, we had 3 examples because we think a single approach won't work. But it could be that you want to start small and you could only have one activity, or you might have multiple activities, but you may not attack them all at the same time. But what you're doing is you're formulating a plan of action where activities are tied to strategies. And again, you may have multiple strategies as well. You might focus on instructors. You might also do something at the school level. Next slide. The final component is the benchmarking. And this aligns with the fifth step in the data inquiry cycle, which is focused on monitoring progress and measuring success. This is how you measure the extent to which the activities you're undertaking are contributing to achieving your identified strategies for success, and ideally your overall goal. They should be measurable and quantifiable. They should be designed in a way that inform you on interim or long-term successes. So if the goal is to strengthen CTE teacher engagement in students' IEP plan development, a benchmark could relate to quantifying the number of professional development trainings held to inform teachers of the supports and accommodations students need. They could also be designed to motivate the team to persist in their efforts, for example, because they place high value on achieving the result. So you have to come up with benchmarks that are clearly stated, measurable, and ideally, whether they're interim or long-term, they will excite people to want to continue to work. Next slide. And so, the fifth and final here is the monitoring progress and success. So your benchmarks, right? Your eyes are going to be drawn to the left side of that one-page strategic plan, but those are the ones that you stipulate in your operational plan to track whether you're achieving your goals. And importantly, measuring success can help you determine whether changes or refinements are needed in your approach. Because you don't just do one thing. You want to test, check, refine as you go along. Sharing the information in this one-page plan can motivate people on your implementation team to continue to work. And the positive results can reinforce and sustain the work, both with your own team, but then also if you're able to share these district-wide with administrators, board members, other stakeholders, what you're eventually doing is winning support and very clearly communicating to your community what it is you're trying to achieve. Next slide. This is most times when in my professional career, this is what people go to right away when they, instead of having a comprehensive operational plan, they go right into sort of doing that. What's the task? Who's doing it? And when are we getting it? These are important. These are definitely things that you want to develop as part of your activities. But the idea behind the operational plan is it helps you put a sort of a larger frame on what it is you're attempting to do. It helps you specify a goal, specify strategies and activities. Here's where these now would be aligned to a given activity where you would say, if, for example, in strategy 1, engage CTE instructors, your first activity would be engaging in strategies to accommodate different students' needs. Now here's specific tasks that you carry out, you delegate someone to do it, and you'd measure that you were achieving it. And ideally, that should tie back into your benchmarks. So what I'd like to do now is, first of all, let me look at the chat here and also just stop and say before I turn it over to Melinda, anyone have any comments or thoughts? I'm going to also look at the chat. Any thoughts about a one-page operational plan? Feel free to unmute or chat. Okay, and I'm seeing in the chat that these were the idea of how you go about, for example, Dan's point about critical conversation skills, collaborative problem solving strategies, conflict management, right. Thanks, Kalani. Yes, it is. This one-page plan is a lot easier to track than some of the other tools. Actually, this was used not only at Education Northwest, the company before I joined education used this strategically as an organization. One page, you put it out there, everybody can see what it is you're trying to accomplish. And it's strategically designed in a way that allows you to tackle multiple issues if that's what it takes, because your root cause analysis is probably going to show that there's not just one thing that's causing a problem. Anyone in anything else, or? Then let me go to the next slide and turn it over to Melinda.
Steve, Dan Finley has his hand up.
Hey there, just real quick, I just wanted to point out that the one-page approach, some of the places that I worked in the private sector, these things actually get posted on bulletin boards in publicly visible places. So not only is it incredibly succinct and compact, but it's also very easy to make it quite visible. And that can be very helpful.
Dan, that's interesting. As I've also seen it posted at a CTE regional coordinator on a whiteboard outside of their office, like giant, and they have progress updates on all their goals. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, it's a great point. The private sector businesses, they have to produce, right? Well, education has to produce too. But the goal here is that by trying to put something visible and understandable, that's really important. If it's very clearly laid out and people see themselves in it and how they can work within it, it just makes it a lot more likely that it'll persist, because otherwise these plans get developed, they get put on a shelf, and then 2 years later, when you have to do another CLNA, you come back and you revisit it. But in the interim, they don't necessarily get sustained. Great. Melinda?
Great, thank you, Steve. Yeah, so it sounds like folks are excited to be able to practice using this this tool here in a little bit. So, so yeah, hopefully you've been able to see how the dashboard and the information that's been shared with us thus far are great sources of data that we can use to understand our strengths and opportunities for improvement. And we wanted to take this moment just to also recognize that in addition to the data, there are a lot of other resources that we might want to consider, including the knowledge brought to us from our CTE stakeholders. So like advisory committee members, representatives of business and labor, community-based organizations, and our key constituents, students and families. The resources we shared during these 3 trainings are intended to be used with the other parts of the comprehensive local needs assessment, and ODE will link them in the development of this new guide. And we realize there is work to be done, not only using the data dashboard to complete the needs assessment, but also on translating this work into activities to be included in your Perkins application and spending plans. And I think we're moving into a break right now.
Yeah, so we wanted to recognize you just sat through a lot there. So what we would like to do is, it's now 12:57. At 1:10, this gives you a chance to get something to eat, bio break, check your email. 1:10 we'll come back and we're going to go into an activity and actually get a chance to practice playing with these plans a little bit. And then we will come back and talk a little bit about our experience. So go ahead and we'll be here, but we'll reconvene at 1:10. Thanks, everyone. Okay, it looks like it is 1:10, and we will go ahead and get started again. So what we would like to do is we have budgeted some time to have you take an opportunity to dig into the operational plan and do a little practice playing with that. Next slide, please. So what we have done is we've scheduled breakout rooms. Actually, next slide. For roughly 30 minutes. We'll see how that's going. It may be that as we get into this, if people feel like they've gotten what they need, we can shorten it, but we've scheduled some time. And we have facilitators who are also going to be joining the breakouts to answer any questions and help you identify strategies and benchmarks where appropriate. You can use the note-taking sheet. We sent out an email with it, and I believe we're going to have a link to it in the chat as well. But there's basically a structured note-taking sheet that includes within it a Word version of the actual template. And the nice thing about that is you can take that and then certainly practice using it here now, but also be in a position to use that with your own teams in the future. So before we go to breakouts, basically the strategy here is we'll break into groups. We've tried to group you if you came from a team. We have you there. We also recognize that because we don't have that many people, we're able to actually have 2 breakouts. And so we'll break into groups. Some of you will be either you can work on your own if you would prefer, or we can just have it as a discussion, but we'll take some time and then reconvene back in the main room to talk a little bit about the experience. Any questions before we break out? You can click in the chat and download, if you don't have the email, the activity 1 plan. Okay, then Jenny, why don't you go ahead and break us out?
Everyone's been assigned to a breakout now. If you don't see an invitation, just click on the breakout icon.
Hey, so it looks like we are back. Is that? Great. So I think we have everybody back now. And we wanted to, we were realizing that there were some opportunities and some I guess, learnings that was possibly better done together. So in any case, we're back here and we wanted to, we had some questions here in terms of equity gaps, root causes and strategies. But before we go into sort of the scripted ones, would someone like to sort of share some of what came up in some of the conversations and what you were discussing?
I can go because we derailed and it was my fault.
Sure.
We talked a little bit more about because some of us are in position in schools and some of us are in the position of regional coordinator. We talked about really what it would look like to facilitate this work within the individual school districts, what groups are going to be needed. Does it make sense to do it? Some of my thoughts are, does it make sense to do this as a region, or does it make sense to do this on the individual school level? And kind of talking about and hearing other people's plans and how they plan to bring this work to the right groups. And then also in consulting with some of the people that are working directly in the schools. And asking some questions of our leaders about when this work is due and when we're going to actually see the plan, and in order for us to plan. That was kind of the majority of our discussion.
So we actually started, I don't know if anyone from the group would like to say anything, but we started a conversation thinking about how we might tackle a specific issue. And in particular, it was females, students identifying as female who are not persisting to concentrate or plus, and started to come up with ideas of strategies then and some activities that could address that. But then we had a conversation also about finding the activities and the best way to do that. Because it can be challenging. Is there anyone from our group who'd like to say anything about that? No one? So I will say that we talked a little bit about ransacking the literature and the idea that one would, the one strategy to do so would be to go to certainly the links that we provided in this presentation, but also to think about their organizations like ACTE and Advanced CTE as well as the Peer Collaborative Resource Network, where there are strategies that are provided, but they may not be rigorous in the sense that they haven't been proven to work. And so as a consequence, some of this is about trying to find either activities or strategies that either are evidence-based or that you believe maybe were evidence-based, but not specifically for the population that you're working on. So for example, I think it was brought up that Hispanic students aren't necessarily English learners, but might there be some strategies with English learners that could translate over? I'm probably butchering that.
That sounds pretty close. Just our regional goal is to look at increasing retention in our Hispanic students, our Latinx populations. We have pockets of really high diversity in some school districts, but a lot of the research I'm finding is just ELL, and I'm not ready to commit that ELL and Latinx are the same. So that was some of the issues I was having.
Mm-hmm. Rob also brought up during the group that for him, having the benchmarks on the left, as opposed to having them on the right, so start with the strategy, activities, or benchmarks, there's no right answer here. I think that the way that the template was put together when I first was exposed to it was because people are sort of results oriented, starting with the benchmarks, and directing people's attention to that is a way of getting them excited, particularly when you're achieving your benchmarks. That said, maybe in the development process, you can play around with this this template any way you'd like. Any thoughts in terms of how one might apply this around the comprehensive local needs assessment? This process.
So for me, and this is kind of part of what we were talking about, it's going to have to be individual school meetings. And then similar to my colleague Shireen, who had to leave for another meeting, I think we're going to try and pull together district or school level groups that include the CTE administrators, as many CTE teachers as we can get involved, as well as some of the career counselors, regular counselors. And if we can, we'd love to get some students involved as well. The other thing that's kind of floating around in the back of my head that I want to do that I don't know how I'm going to do yet is parent involvement. I really, really like to get some parent voice in there in something aside from like a survey that we send home or through Parent View. That's just floating around there, though. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to figure that part out. But this is going to be a good structure for me to walk the group through. Like, here's the data in your specific school. I know we won't have a lot of time. So I'll maybe get 1 2-hour meeting in the schools for each school. So I think I'm going to have to do some, I'm going to use the technical term here, squishing. I'm going to have to squish some of the, here's the data, squish some of the root cause analysis, squish some of the planning in order to be able to get that in the time that I think that I'm going to have. I'm going to end it there because I don't know what I'm talking about today.
Okay, any last thoughts? All right, Jenny, why don't you turn back the slides, and Ella, I'm going to introduce my colleague Ella Jamor to sort of take us through the last part here. Ella?
Thanks, Steve. So for those of you who don't know me, I co-lead the research partnership with Michelle, through which we're able to bring you these trainings. And I led for those of you who are in training too, I led the training on root cause analyses, which is one of my areas of expertise is data use and helping our stakeholders make better use of data and evidence to improve policy and practice. So this concludes this 3-part training on career and technical education data in Oregon. So what we've done through these training, we've been trying to help you plan and begin to implement a data inquiry cycle to help you address equity gaps in your CTE programming. And now you can replicate that with your stakeholders as you prepare for the CLNA and complete the equity section in the plan. Now, we have only modeled 1 round of data inquiry cycle. In practice, the idea is that you would repeat that cycle multiple times. Usually, typically it's done in cycles of 3 months, so you can make course corrections in a timely manner and not implement something for a year before realizing that it's not working and a lot of time has been wasted. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, the first training was designed to introduce you to the CTE Participation Explorer tool. So it's an interactive dashboard that it was designed to provide you with access to the statewide data on CTE participation, and also to have the ability to select your own region, your own district, or your own school. And by using the tool, you can identify equity gaps for a cross-section of students in a given year, or you can select and analyze outcomes by student cohort. And our goal in doing that was to put data into your hands and to help you think about how to use these data so you can isolate performance gaps across student groups and for CTE programs. And next slide, please. So in training 2, we introduced you to the concept of root cause analysis, and we shared some tools to help you think about underlying causes of the equity gaps that you observe, and a process for winnowing down causes to the primary drivers of performance. What we often find is that if we don't go through this root cause analysis process, we are too quick to identify what the problems are, and we end up very often addressing the wrong problem and then wondering why we're not seeing change. So here's the idea: is you identify the wrong problem, you set a goal, and then we shared some strategies to find evidence-based solutions that you can implement to address the root causes that you've identified. Next slide, please. So today we were trying to bring together the work in identifying persistent gaps and conducting the root cause analysis to operationalize a comprehensive plan for improvement. And so this was just an introduction. We know your deadline is not until 2023, but we hope that you can use this 3-step process and the resources that we're providing and the activities to help drive improvement in your own district and get you closer to where you need to be little by little. Any questions on any of this? Okay. All right. So I would like to thank you for participating, for being engaged today. And so the REL team has developed and refined the database. So thank you to the team. And also would like to thank our state level partners who have been helping us getting the word out about this and other REL trainings. And a lot of those are posted online, become public, so you can use them as you wish. And I believe yes, there is a link in the chat for the training and resources that are already made publicly available. And then I anticipate it will take another couple of weeks, but then this training materials and recording will be available as well. And with that, thank you for being here with us. Do not hesitate to contact us, even if we can be just maybe thought partners for you guys if you need it. A reminder of our free librarian service. It's only available until the end of 2021, but if you need any research resources that you don't have time to go get, we can do that for you. So reach out to us and we will take care of that. And with that, have a wonderful week and a wonderful rest of 2021. Thanks, everyone.